That's the view that you're
That's
seeing.
fabulous.
It's right there.
That is fabulous. You should be very happy with that, sir.
I am. It's nice.
Very happy. Very happy.
I'm starting to record.
We're here. We're right here, sir.
I know you're right here. And Gary's got an amazing view.
But I'm wondering where Remso is. I hope he has not been kidnapped.
Kidnapped by cats. And on that note, I want to welcome everybody to the world according to that man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. I want to welcome everybody that's watching in the YouTube chat. I want to thank everybody that's been downloading our podcasts and giving us great reviews. It means a lot. Remember, we are on Rumble now, rumble.com, rumble on, sing that song, Ben Stein. And we are joined tonight from the simplelifenow.com, Gary Collins, the man with one of the best podcasts on the internet. Welcome, as always, Gary Collins.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Of course. And it's sort of an optical illusion what's going on with your picture. If your face looks like it's going in and out of focus, it's sort of cool. It sort of looks like one of those movies.
Space Age. Let's get high and watch Gary's face.
This show would not be complete without provocateur, saint, sinner, lover, father, grandfather, husband,
lawyer, economist, and screenwriter, novelist, poet, and
doctor. Dr. Benjamin Jeremy Stein. Welcome, sir.
You're welcome. Do you have an appointment?
No need for an appointment with Dr. Benjamin Jeremy Stein. Everybody gets to get healed 3 times a week from you for free.
Healed.
That's what I would always say to Ben when he got out of therapy. I would go, "You're healed."
And I would always say, "You're never healed."
You're never healed. And on that note, of course, welcome everybody to the world according to Ben Stein, the Saturday night special edition. We were expecting Remso, but I'm not sure where Remso is. But who needs a Remso when you have a Gary Collins?
Where are you?
Where art thou, Remso? But Gary, the other night of the show,
please.
Ben, we had a different panel on, and Ben asked a question, and we were all perplexed by the answer. And Ben asked,
couldn't answer,
but we couldn't answer. It was literally like a scene out of Ferris Bueller, like where he was asking them, "Smoot Holly," and he was doing that scene, and like everybody was like this. And he posed the question as, "Who's the Secretary of State?" And none of us were able to answer the question.
None was able. None is a singular pronoun.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Lovin. We weren't able to answer the question, okay. And I couldn't stop thinking about that, Gary and Ben, since the show, that we weren't able to answer the question. And then today, I decided, Ben Stein, to Google who's in the cabinet.
Yes, who is in the cabinet? I
can't remember their names. I'm not joking. You know my memory, and I'm a wonk when it comes to this stuff. I know there's the African American general.
And what is his name?
I couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you for the life of me. I totally forgot it.
I believe it's distinguished as resume.
I know there's the Latino guy that's the head of something, and my bigger point,
Rumba.
The bigger point being, Ben, is I feel like we are a country in disarray. I feel like there's a real chaotic. Even though, like we brought this up on the show before, Trump was supposedly Mr. Chaos, yet we had so much calm as far as stability with the economy, stability with foreign affairs. And right now we have neither, in my humble opinion. We're facing certain things that could possibly in the future. And I don't think anybody knows who's running this damn country.
Well, this isn't a damn country. It's the best country there's ever been in the whole world. By far, this is the greatest invention of man of all time. But it is a good question. Who is running America? I mean, obviously, Biden doesn't know whether he's coming or going. When he gives a talk, he doesn't know whether he's coming or going. He doesn't write what he's, of course, well, no president writes what he says. But we don't know who his speechwriters are. We don't know where they come from. Today, he issued a statement about Police Week, which was just a sneering, ridiculously, statistically impossible jab at America's policemen and women. Who knows where that stuff comes from, except that maybe he is the creature of Black Lives Matter. I don't know. He does not seem to me to be the president of white Americans. He seems to be the president of African Americans, which is fine. They deserve to have a president. Latin Americans, that's fine. They deserve to have a president. But white people are supposed to have a president too. So where is our president?
What's
Or
really
maybe I'm
funny,
not
I just,
considered white. Where's our president?
somebody, sorry to interrupt you, Ben, but somebody said something really funny in the chat. Brady said, "Don't worry about it, Judah. Biden doesn't remember their names either." I think that is easily the joke of the night, and I wanted to get into that. And what Ben's referring to, that a lot of people may not realize, is today is Biden gave a speech celebrating it's Police Week, right? It's and
Police Week, but I'm not sure he gave a speech. I think he might have just issued a statement.
He issued a statement. Well, right. He issued a statement, Gary. I don't know if you saw this, where he basically, the first paragraph or the first couple lines were, how great the police were, and we love them and all that jazz. And then he gets into, but of course we can't ignore the several.
I think he said more than several
minorities that of black and brown that have been murdered or had issues with the police. And as I got to Ben's house tonight, I said to him, I said, several. I mean, if you take the amount of policing a year and you say several, it is a minuscule to the amount of calls they get, to the amount of scenes of crimes they have to go to, Gary. Several. And then we looked into how many people were shot last weekend in Chicago, which was 45 people last weekend. Gary Collins in Chicago were shot. 45. That's more than several, right? I mean,
we don't talk about them except on this show. That's not to be mentioned. That's not to be mentioned.
What say you, Gary Collins?
It's racist for you to mention
that more people were shot in Chicago over the weekend than Kabul. Never mind that, though. It's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But I love when someone does that, though. They start off with the positive, then it's comma, but, and here it comes. Here we go. And with that, the millions and millions of contacts that police have every year and the calls they go in on, when you break it down statistically, it isn't even a rounding error. I mean, literally, when you think of any profession with that many contacts and the number of shall we say, negative incidents, it's actually fairly remarkable when you think about it.
It's
when
not
you
just fairly remarkable, Gary. It's remarkable.
It really is. And we're not saying that there aren't bad cops. Of course there are. There's bad everything. There's no profession that doesn't have bad something. So that's not
definitely bad politicians.
Well, yeah, it's just not to put it, just sweep it under the rug or anything. But the fact is, I don't know what they have against the police so much, besides that they know if they can get everyone against the police, get the police defunded, it makes it easier for them to control everyone else. That's all I can figure.
No, I think it's just they're just looking for excuses. We're looking for excuses, endless excuses, to try to explain why it is that the Democrat-controlled cities, very largely black, cannot get their act together and cannot do anything right. So they have to blame somebody. They're not going to blame the blacks, because you're not allowed to blame the blacks for anything. So you have to blame the police. That's what's happening. And in our beloved California, some city, I forget which one it is, I think San Diego, has billboards blaming birth defects among African-American children on the police and on discrimination.
I actually think it's Trump's fault. That's who I blame it on.
What is that about? It's just we're heading into a land of complete paranoid delusion.
Yeah, get rid of critical thinking, turn brains to mush.
Critical race theory. That's what I think. I've been poisoned by critical race theory. A terrible, terrible, terrible idea. A terrible idea, and yet it's spreading like a cancer among the schools of America. It's a shockingly bad idea. It says that all the problems caused in America are caused by racism. It's an astonishingly bad idea. I don't know where it came from.
I think though what you said is a very good point, but I think Gary's correct too. What they're doing with the police and what they're doing, it's part of the cancel culture. It's all one big form of cancel culture. I don't, let's get the critical race theory, right? I don't want to get the critical race theory, but there's one word in there that I don't believe they use, which is critical thinking. We assume that they wake up and they think these things through. I don't believe they do. I just believe they wake up in a morning and decide Israel's an apartheid state. We don't need the police. They're all racist. Whatever sounds good, whatever theory they learned in their community college or whatever, wherever.
No. Oh boy. You're wrong about that. It's whatever theory they learned at Harvard. My very, very close friend.
I don't think Rashida Tlaib went to Harvard.
No, but my very close friend at Yale Law School, Duncan Kennedy, invented critical legal thinking, or at least played a large part in it. And that led very directly to critical race theory.
Gary?
Well, and you notice how they always change the name as well. It used to be, what was it? Black theology.
Liberation theology.
Liberation, yeah, black liberation theology. And they play the word game. So the average American will never be able to quite figure out what they're getting at, to include educated Americans as well, because it makes no sense. They use the word, it sounds really smart.
That's the whole point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's to trick you. It's to trick you into thinking that they're smarter than you, and only they can know what racism is. You just don't understand, Judah and Ben. You're just too white and stupid to figure it out, okay? Just, that's it. I mean, that's basically what they're saying.
I'm not that white.
And by the way, to all those concerned, Ben and I both have had bronchial issues. Ben is sneezing and coughing now. He's fine. I promise.
Oh, no, you guys got COVID-20. You better get your immunization.
That's actually...
I've gotten my vaccinations, both of them, and I was sicker after I got the second one than I'd ever been in my life.
That's actually something, though, Gary. You raise a great point with words. The left likes to use, I mean, and I've always said this, anytime there's an organization, that's the World Health Organization, anything with global, world, or any of those things, run for the hills. Never trust them. Never donate to those organizations. It sounds good. It almost sounds like a thing Bernie Madoff would have made up, like the name of his fund, like the World Good Fund. Sorry.
As a writer, here's something both of you guys are writers too, obviously. Have you guys noticed over the last 5 years how they've been changing grammar? I get very confused with grammar these days.
With the premeans, with the pronouns, with the pronouns, with
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you use a comma here this year, next year you can't. Then it's like, wait. And what I think the theory is, I think what they're doing is it's a way for them, if they can change the rules. If you've ever noticed, if you get in an argument with someone who is far left, or left, and they want to attack you, they attack your grammar. And I think they do that so it's ambiguous, so they can always attack your grammar no matter what, because you don't know what the hell the rules are.
This is all in 1984, the changing of the language and the control of the language. Orwell saw it all coming. And there was a whole department within the Ministry of Truth that handled it. I hope I'm not dying. I'd like you to know that if I am dying on the air, which could happen, my last thoughts are that I love my wife and she's a saint.
I want to tell you something though, very funny though about the grammar. But in the days when I was able to get a date or have a conversation on dating apps, Gary, there's a lot of women who are like grammar Nazis. Who I would be in the middle of having a conversation with them, and they would comment on my grammar, and I'd be like, this is texting, it's shorthand, and I would just delete them right away, because I was like, if I'm in trouble now, where will I be in a week? Like
this is why it's good to have a wife that you've been married to for 50 plus years. She does not correct your grammar.
I think I've missed the mark on that one. It's come and gone. And but yeah, I think there's something to what Gary's saying. Is I think what the bigger picture, by the way, is if you throw 1,000 things at something, nobody could focus on what these idiots, what the real sinister
Yeah.
plans that
But
they're
but
doing.
you can with critical race theory. The critical race theory is to say, look, here we have a problem. The black community is way less educated than the white community. They save way less, even though their earnings are only slightly less. That's an interesting fact. Their savings are something like 10% of the average white family savings, but their earnings are tiny bit less. Their savings are 90% less, but their earnings are only slightly less. Cannot be their fault for not being prudent. It has to be Whitey's fault. Black people have incredibly more encounters with the police than white people on a per capita basis. That cannot be the black people's fault. That has to be the white people's fault. Black people are in prison at a rate per capita far, far higher than white people. That cannot be black people's fault. It has to be Whitey's fault. So everything that's happening in the black community that's not wholesome is Whitey's fault. Now, don't get me wrong. I work with, unlike most people that you know, I work with black people almost every day. And I notice some of them are very smart, like white people. Some of them are very stupid, like white people. But if you go around excusing people and telling them that no matter what they do, it's not their fault, they're going to act badly. That will happen no matter what. So we've gotten way down into that rabbit hole. And it's a very scary, dark rabbit hole. It's going to eventually lead to dictatorship. We're on our way to dictatorship right now. Still, don't get me wrong. Day by day, life in America is great. I'm going to have yummy shrimp, wild shrimp for dinner. It's unbelievably good. Most people can't even get it. I can get it just 5 minutes away from here. That life in America is unbelievably great. But if I wanted to, I could complain and say, oh, I can't get brand new, fresh wild shrimp that was only caught 5 minutes ago because of anti Semitism. But Jews don't work that way. Jews say, look, here's the way cards were dealt. Let's do the best we can with them. No. And that's what our leaders have taught us. You don't see any Jews out there demonstrating against anti-Semitism. I've told you this on this show many times. I could walk out the door as feeble as I am and walk 10 minutes and come to a very fancy club, the LA Country Club, that's restricted against Jews. You're not going to see any Jews demonstrating outside it. Jews will make their own club and go happily play golf or pinochle or whatever they play there. That's just not the way Jews operate. And notice Jews are doing really, really well. Chinese, Indo-Chinese, Filipino, they don't blame everybody else for their problems, and so they get ahead. People who blame everybody else for their problems and say it's never my fault, they don't get ahead.
And on that note, if you just tuned in, you are listening to the words and wisdom of Benjamin Jeremy Stein on the world, according to Ben Stein, who's having a bit of bronchial issues tonight and a sneezing fit. Gesundheit many times over, sir.
God bless you, sir. God bless you.
And I want to welcome everybody that's in the chat with your funny comments. Remember, please download our podcast. Go to rumble.com, subscribe to Ben's email, benstein.substack.com. I was able to get onto Parler for about half a minute today, and then I got knocked off. I don't know what's going on with them still, but your love and your following, especially on the podcast, has been amazing. Don't forget to give us those 5-star reviews. It really helps us. And don't forget to give Gary those 5-star reviews on his podcast. It is really helpful. It builds up your algorithm. It does something, and it expands the audience. And we need all the love and the support we could get. We do this for fun and for free, but we still need that love and support. I want to welcome everybody back to the world according to Ben Stein, where you have conversations that nobody else has. Nobody else dares to talk about these things. You get skittish around it or whatever. But Gary, somebody in the chat brought up a good point that people are starting to come around. I have a friend that actually texted me that they had a friend that could no longer be a Democrat because of what's going on with Israel, and it was actually a Jewish girl, and I said, "Is she hot?" And he said,
"That's very, very funny."
And he said, "No, but I'm looking out. But I'll look out for you." And I was like, "Thanks." And I was like, you can't have it all, but I'll take her as part of the movement away. But I do think you push people, as you have said many times, Ben. You push people in a corner, you choke them enough, they might have the ability to change.
Well, they might, but we have a real serious problem because in German, people used to say, and historians would say, why didn't the German people revolt against Adolf Hitler? Well, because the Gestapo was around to take any individual or group or family who protested and kill them, chop their heads off. So we don't have the Gestapo in America yet, but we do have the media, which can ruin you and say terrible things about you and smear you. Excuse me. And suddenly you're an unperson. In Stalin's Russia, and even in Khrushchev's Russia, they had the concept of the unperson, which is a person who was not in step with party leadership. And so he or she was sort of banned, and his or her name could not be mentioned. That person became an unperson. That's what's happening in America right now. We have to fight it. We do fight it on our little show. It's a little tiny show, but there are those who love it. We are fighting back against the depersonalization of conservative thinkers.
So I got to tell you, so Gary, so yesterday I went to go get a haircut, and I said I was vaccinated, and the person that was giving the haircut said they were vaccinated, and I said, why are you wearing a mask? And I was like, please take off your mask. And I close my eyes and I look up and they're still wearing their mask. And I'm like, what are you wearing your mask for? You got vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I'm not lying about this. And it's amazing how this past year, and I've called it, we called it on the last show, it was the Great Reset, and even the CDC, all the mixed messaging that's going on right now is to create chaos. So we can't focus on any sort of anything. I said to Ben before the show, do you remember a president being a president this long and not meeting with a foreign leader?
Well, or an important foreign leader in any event. I imagine he met with somebody. Maybe he hasn't.
No, I don't think he has.
I'm not sure that his handlers trust him to talk to any foreign leaders. I don't know what Kamala Harris is doing besides laughing inappropriately. I don't know what this administration is doing. The only thing we know is the media, essentially like a group of Peronist South American, Argentinian generals, placed him in control. And there he is, and he doesn't know what to do. But I will say he hasn't done all bad. I'm not joking here. He hasn't done all bad at all. He's done some good things. And
what has he done that's good?
He supported Israel 100%, and that's good.
Oh, stop!
He did.
Come on,
yes,
he's talking, Ben. He hasn't supported Israel.
Yes, he has.
Oh no, Ben. He did the same thing with Israel that he did with the police today.
No, he didn't. No, he did not.
He gave Israel full support, but at the same time, on the other day, he said, watch the killing of civilians, or with the killing.
He has to say that. That's not unusual, and that's not particularly bad.
I could tell you one person that wouldn't have said that. That was Donald J. Trump. But Gary, can I ask you a question?
Considering what we know about him and the people who are around him, I think he's doing great about Israel.
I have to 100% disagree with you for the first time in my life, and say 100% disagree with you. But I go to you, Gary Collins. Do you remember a president not meeting any foreign leaders, not having anybody over at the White House? And I get it. Granted, they're using COVID as an excuse. So the question is, how long could they train these dogs to not
bark?
To not bark and to not, and it's not like the world is going great. France is on the edge of a civil war because of the Muslim population. There's a lot of chaos going around, Gary, and there is no diplomacy. There's nothing going on.
Well, no, and going back to the Gestapo, people forget they literally chopped people's heads off with a guillotine. So
yeah, they did. I know.
Yeah. People forget this stuff. They go, oh no, that's what they used in the Dark Ages. No, Hitler used those. Sorry, guys, they used to do that.
Well, they used it. It was invented during the French Revolution, but
Yeah, yeah.
they did all kinds of horrible things. But it is very hard. Look, it's very. I don't mean in any sense to compare the fine media apparatus of America with the Gestapo. It's just that we face a
No.
solid wall of defense around President Biden and his entourage of media. And
Well,
how we break through that wall, I do not know.
he's mentally incompetent. I mean, there's no way they're going to allow him to meet with any foreign leader because that will, I mean, that lets the witch out behind the curtain at that point.
Right,
They'll
because
know
you can't,
for sure.
right, because you can't
cannot
write.
expose him. You
Yeah.
cannot. And Kamala Harris, you can't put her in front of anyone either. So it's kind of a bad situation of we don't know who's running the country. We literally don't know. That's a scary thought to me. If you were to ask anyone right now,
who do you
even
think
in Washington D.C., they wouldn't know.
Who do you think it is, Gary?
But this is, can I tell everybody something? So Gary, I want to let me preface Ben's question because we had this conversation last night. Now, I want to tell everybody out there, I've known Ben Stein for 18 years. Never in our lives have Ben and I had more I don't even want to call them conspiratorial thoughts than, and we're going down this rabbit hole last night, Gary, of like, of who's running things, because nobody appears to be running anything. And I said to Ben on the phone, I can't believe we're even having this conversation.
I know. It's an amazing thing. It's very hard for me to tell what our program is. I mean, by the way, I haven't seen a submission of a defense budget yet. I mean, defense is an enormously important part of the responsibility of the government. Usually the government, by this point, a new government has submitted a defense plan. I haven't seen our government do that. That's a little bit strange. I haven't seen them submit a foreign policy plan. That's a bit strange. When I worked for Mr. Nixon, I was a very, very young man, but I still remember he had detailed plans within about a week after inaugural day. Very detailed plans for almost every part of his administration. A lot of them didn't work out, but he had detailed plans. What does Mr. Blinken? What does blink, wink, and nod? What does Mr. Biden have? We don't know. We just don't know, and we don't know who's pulling the strings. Clearly, he's a marionette. Who are pulling the strings? I think it's Black Lives Matter, but I don't know.
Oh, they're too busy buying real estate. I don't think they have time right now for such petty things. But with that, I definitely think the progressive left is definitely steering the ship. Now, whether they're running the country, I don't know. I honestly don't know. And this is the first time in my life, too, where I've said, I'm not real sure who's doing what. Kamala Harris is in charge of the border, and she's never been to the border yet.
I don't think she's even made a comment about it. As far as I know,
she hasn't done anything.
Hasn't done anything about it.
Nothing. Zero. And
it's a crisis.
I kid you not. That all they do is go, well, the border's closed. And it's like, you do realize we have these things called cameras. we can see this. And they're just all, no one's there. Don't worry about it. And it's like, I think what their belief is that most of America is unengaged. So they just need to say it as many times as they possibly can. And like I said, it's regurgitation nation. So they just have to keep saying it. And all the bobbleheads go, yeah. There's no border problem. No, there's no one there. And that's what you get. And I think a portion of America is waking up, though. They're starting to say enough is enough.
What portion do you think is that, Gary, my dear friend?
I think independents. Rasmussen had a poll where they blamed the border crisis on Biden and not Trump.
Well, that's good.
So that's actually Rasmussen's been a fairly accurate poller. I know people love to call him a Republican or whatever, but he's one of the most accurate pollsters in America, if that can be, if we believe that anymore. But I would venture to say, and I would venture to say they right now they hate that Trump did Operation Warp Speed, because their greatest asset for a year was COVID. That was their greatest asset to achieve goals. And with 36% of the population right now vaccinated, 20% really not having to get vaccinated, remember, the midterms are coming up in less than 16 months. In less than 16 months, the midterms are coming up. I think they're ruining. They wish this rollout with the vaccines, because people are going to go out and vote, and all these states that are passing these laws, Ben Stein, that you have to go with election laws. I think they're sort of scared.
I don't think they're scared at all. And may I tell you why? One, the
please.
stock market is doing really, really well. That affects a lot of people. Not everybody, but a lot of people. Two, the property market is doing unbelievably, phenomenally, incredibly well. Three, there is basically no involuntary unemployment at this point. All of these are because of plans set in motion by Mr. Trump, but they all mean a prosperous, happy America. And I don't see where the dissatisfaction is going to come in, especially because all day and all night, the media is going to say what a great guy Biden is and how peace and quiet and prosperity have returned to America. We cannot count on anything but pure defense, putting up a steel barrier, iron dome around President Biden.
And I will quote Ben Stein when you say you know, when people ask you about the future of the economy, that you have anybody that could predict the economy is a liar, or is
it cannot be
done.
done.
So as you look at it today, as everything within a moment's time, we could be going to the store and a bottle of ketchup is $10.
Well, I will tell you, since I do the grocery shopping in the Stein family, the Stein Denman family, that I have already noticed very, very drastic price increases in the foods I buy, which are almost always either meat or fish.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I am reading your comments. It's actually one of the things I was going to discuss tonight. I want to thank everybody, of course, for the podcast downloads, 5-star reviews, benstein.substack.com. I'm becoming a pro at saying it. I'm very excited with myself. I used to have a very hard time with saying substack.com. And of course, Gary Collins from thesimplelifenow.com. But people, and it really bothers me and it really scares me, is these vaccine cards. This idea of having
to talk about Israel.
What?
Are we going to talk about Israel?
If you want to, but I wanted to get into the vaccine cards first, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead. It's your show.
It's your show. It's your world. But people wanted to talk about the vaccination cards, and I think it's important. I think it's very important to talk about, because it's another form of control, Ben. That in order to get, and I was talking, and Gary, I know you're not an anti-vaxxer, but you're not getting this vaccination. And I said to you on the phone, I got one. I'm not going to say to you to get one. It's none of my business. You live how you want to live. And I said to Ben before the show, if I'm vaccinated and I'm in a store, what does it matter to me if somebody's not vaccinated? I'm vaccinated. By science, right? I'm protected. What does it matter to me? And at a certain point, so many of us will have had herd immunity. The other people that haven't been vaccinated, and then you take all the variables, Ben, of all the children that don't get it and all these different things. We're getting to the point where it's a very frightening thing to have to present a card that you're vaccinated. That stores will allow you in if you're vaccinated simply means, because the only way they're going to know it is if you should present the card. And that is a frightening thought.
It is a very frightening thought, but as we have noted, the hallmark of this administration has been ever increasing control over the ordinary citizen. And I think COVID was a brilliant opportunity for them to express that, and the media is behind them 100%. So it's just a kind of scary thought.
And somebody Gary, go ahead.
I got a question. I'm going to use some logic here. As a dummy who grew up in a trailer in the middle of nowhere, if the at-risk group is almost all immunized and the rest aren't, what's the risk? There is no risk, because who's left? The odds of them getting very ill from it are almost zero. I'm confused by just the basic logic behind all this. I understand herd immunity. I've been in health for decades, but all you need to do is immunize the at-risk group. That's who you need to immunize. After that, it does not matter anymore.
Yeah, but
it really doesn't.
there's still plenty of people in the at-risk group who haven't been immunized, and but I must say, as a person who got violently sick from the second shot, and whose wife got violently sick from the second shot, I
Yeah.
don't blame people at all who don't want to get the second shot, not in the slightest.
And as a
Okay.
person that got the second shot, Gary, and also had 103 fever that night and was shaking trust me, at that moment, I was the only reason I got the shot is for people to know is because I have my father who's immunocompromised, who could
There
get
you
very
go.
sick.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
got it so I could go and visit my folks who I haven't seen in ages. That was
Absolutely.
the biggest reason for me getting the shot. If that wasn't the case, I would not have gotten vaccinated. And the thing that I found ironic is not ironic, but really crazy. And I've spoken about this is that after I got the shot and I told people how violently ill I got, other people started saying it to me. Oh, I got sick too. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me before that? How come? And I think people have been
Wait till
even
after you get sick.
right. I think people have been so frightened into not sharing the side effects of the shot
I don't know if it's
because
a side effect. I'm not sure it's a side effect.
or the effect of the
Yeah.
shot. They've been so browbeaten into not doing that because one, they don't want to scare people into not getting it, and one, they don't want to sound like they're becoming an anti-vaxxer or whatever it is. They become so indoctrinated that nobody's sharing their side effects. I mean, and let me tell you something. Those side effects are, and as Ben knows,
Terrible.
are
Terrible.
frightening. When you wake up at 1:30 in the morning, Gary, and you're like, I have 103 fever, and you're literally, it felt like the worst flu I've had. It's a terrifying thing, and I say to people, do it at your own risk. I don't I don't believe it should be forced on the population like they're trying to.
Well, and here's my point yet again. So, say you have elderly parents or they're in the at-risk group. If they get immunized, God, why can't I say that?
It's a hard word.
Immunized. It's terrible for me. Why would it matter if you're immunized or not? Because they're technically not at risk anymore. See, I'm having a problem with this circular thought pattern. It makes zero sense to me. If the shot works, why would you get immunized if your parents already are? I'm struggling. My little
We're all
dumb monkey brain
struggling.
can't
I think that's
comprehend.
the whole thing. We're all struggling because as we get back to the circle of life, Simba, nobody knows who's running things. Nobody knows who's putting these things in motion. Nobody trusts who's putting these things in motion. Or not
You
nobody.
don't trust Dr. Fauci?
I know I'm taking a real big long shot on saying I don't trust Dr. Anthony Fauci. But on that note, Ben, off of vaccines, you want to talk about Israel? You talk about whatever you want. You tell me what you want to talk about, Ben.
I'm horrified. Here's the situation. I got an email today from a very smart friend of mine who sent me a clipping, which I should have seen. It's my own fault for not seeing it, in the Wall Street Journal, in which they pointed out that the Palestinians say they resorted to rocketry and terrorism because Israel had stolen some land from Arabs in Jerusalem. These two lawyers who had written this article for the Wall Street Journal, traced title to these pieces of land back to 1875, not 1975, and found that these pieces of land had been in Jewish hands all that time. At some point, some Arabs had sold it to them. So it's been a Jewish property for a long, long time. It wasn't stolen from the Arabs. Some Arabs just came in and were squatters on the land and said, now it's ours, but they never owned it. And there's no right of possession by squatting in Israel, and not really anywhere at this point. So that's one. So that was a totally fake excuse. Two, it horrifies me that in the United States of America, we are having fairly good-sized demonstrations against Israel, which is being called an occupier and a colonizer and so forth. It's Israel's country. They're supposed to be able to defend themselves. It's just a miracle for the people of Israel that they have such good scientists and military people that they can create an Iron Dome situation in which very few of the rockets are fired, but still enough get through to harm or kill innocent people. So the fact that these demonstrations are happening all over America is very, very discouraging. And it just shows there are people stupid enough and anti-Semitic enough to support anything that's against Jews. And that is really the third part as well. My wife, who's the smartest person in my family by a long way, says anti-Semitism is so deeply rooted, it has to be genetic. There has to be some kind of DNA strand. I don't agree with her, even though she's smarter than I am. I think it's just that human beings have a basic need to hate, and the Jews fulfill that need.
I mean, that was brilliantly well said. And you forgot to mention all the anti-Semitic activity that's going on across the world with the burning of the Israeli flags. I believe in the UK, an Israeli interviewer was attacked today. A reporter was attacked today, but nobody brings it up. It doesn't matter. Like I said on the last show, in Nazi Germany, it was against the law to be a Jew. And after Nazi Germany, it's against the law, Gary Collins, to have self-defense if you're a Jew. It's one or the other. It's either allow yourselves to be murdered or just walk like the sheep. And there's a country right now that doesn't have to do that doesn't abide by those rules, and people can't stand it. Ben, I think people cannot stand that there's Jews that could defend themselves. There was a great joke, not a great joke. It was a joke that I heard years ago. What's the difference between, the difference between an Italian in America and a Jew in America and an Italian? It was basically, nobody's scared of a Jew in America, but you put a uniform on him like an Israeli soldier, everybody's terrified of him. You take an Italian in America, everybody's scared of him. You put a uniform on him, nobody's scared of him.
Oh, that's very funny. Let's bear in mind the Italians fought incredibly bravely in World War I.
But Ben, you get the point. And and Gary, this idea that Jews are not allowed to defend themselves is a frightening freaking thing.
It's very frightening.
Well, again,
I'm sorry, Gary, something is right.
Oh, the media, playing a game again. And I would say from an Irishman who knows nothing, that I'm amazed that Israel hasn't just gone in and just wiped the place out. I'm actually surprised by that.
Well, what
because
if
someone lobs bombs at me, oh, you're going to get it back and then some. I'm going to go back and I'm going to annihilate you. And I think there's been a lot of restraint exercised over decades and decades. This war has been going, well, hundreds of years, but it's one of those where you're like, you have to be able to defend yourself, but you only are allowed to defend yourself if you're on the right team. If you're on the wrong team, you're not allowed, and you're a racist. It's pretty simple. That's
right. The only time Israel was allowed to defend themselves, Ben, was when they had no weapons.
That wasn't even allowed. That even then they're being criticized.
And amazingly, and this is what should fear Jews and Christians, because it's the same group at this point. And you had that idiot who I don't understand, other than him being black, has a show on Comedy Central, which is Trevor Noah, which he took over for Stephen Colbert, Gary. And I mean, not an ounce of humor. Sorry?
Yeah, he's annoying.
Just not an ounce of humor in him.
He's a news commentator who, with sarcasm, is what he is.
And on national TV, Ben, he's not American. He said that it's sort of like a big brother beating up he made this crazy analogy with like a brother beating up a little brother. Or like the big brother a little brother fighting the big brother shouldn't fight back because he hits stronger. And that was the analogy, Ben, that he used on national television, that because Israel has the Iron Dome, that Israel has weaponry, they should be okay with having over 4,500 rockets shipped, sent into them, terror being terrorized on the ground in Israel, scared to death of the tunnels that thank God they blew up, that somehow it's acceptable. But it goes to the Christians in America too. They in something you wrote in A View from Sunset Boulevard, you're getting back to A View from Sunset Boulevard, is that it's always a certain group of people that should be allowed to get the crap kicked out of them. that should be allowed to be abused, that should be allowed to be mistreated and not fight back because somehow they have it better.
Yeah, well, this is unfortunately a trait of the American left, and it has been for a very, very long time. It's a very sad thing, and most people don't know it if they're aware of the Holocaust at all. An awful lot of people at this point never even heard of the Holocaust. Uh, the New York Times, owned by Jews, not a public corporation at that point, owned by a Jewish family, was wildly apologetic towards the Nazis when the Nazis started terrorizing, killing, murdering, and turning in concentration camps Jews. They were a disgracefully apologetic pro-Nazi newspaper until actual war was declared. Very scary.
No, I mean it's absolutely terrifying what's going on. But I want to since we're asking questions, because again they like to use words. So you have the anti-Semitic squad, or as Laura Loomer called them, the Hamas caucus, which I thought was
very funny. That's very funny.
I thought it was the most brilliant name she called it, the Hamas caucus. People like to throw around words because word by association, right? So for years, Republicans or conservatives have been called Nazis and Hitler and all these things. But when they go to Israel, they like to use the word apartheid.
Right.
It's an apartheid state, Ben. I want you to explain to people what apartheid actually means.
Apartheid was what Mr. Biden is doing in America right now. It was the awarding of jobs, positions, anything important or unimportant by race. There are three primary races: African, Negro, not allowed to say that, but that's what they said in those days, Indians, East Indians, and whites, and then also mixed race people. And the whites got all the good jobs. The African Negroes, not allowed to say that word anymore, got the terrible jobs, and the Indians got the middling jobs. And that's sort of what's happened in America. It's become racially divided up so that race determines everything. Israel is the least apartheid state in the world. Israel is the only country in the Middle East where everyone, Arab or Jew, who is a citizen or even not a citizen, gets free, top quality medical care. Just to give you an idea of how good natured the Israelis have been, if there's a terrorist fighting, if there were terrorists of ISIS fighting against the Syrian government, if the ISIS person was wounded, badly wounded, ISIS had no medical facilities of any kind to take care of them. The ISIS people would bring them to the nearest Israeli border station and ask the Israelis to take care of them, and the Israelis would. Israeli Arabs can vote. There are many Israelis in there are many Arabs in the Israeli parliament. There are Arabs in the Israeli cabinet. This is something that's unknown in the Middle East, except in Israel. It's the only country that is not a racist state. It's the only one that isn't. And Mr. Biden is quickly making America into a racist and racialist state. Very quickly.
They have LGBTQ rights there over there. They have, I mean, every single thing they have. But it goes again to the thing of I really don't understand what threatens people about the tough Jew. It about the Jew that could defend themselves. It's almost to me like it's like we should simply be sheeps marching into the slaughter, and never again. And never again will that happen. And Gary, I know this isn't your wheelhouse of thinking, but
everything is Gary's wheelhouse. There he is in his wheelhouse.
But again, to us in America, the point that Ben's bringing up, they're slowly but surely doing that to us, that we're not allowed to question.
It's the same tactics. I mean, and it has been historically. We're not seeing anything new. This is how socialism starts, right? It's, again, like I said, you get rid of critical thinking, you blame the other side for doing what you do, and you stir the pot in every opportunity. That's how it works. Because if everyone stays together and everyone can think, you can't win over the masses that way. You got to keep everyone separated, stupid, and fighting each other.
And you've got to have an enemy that you can hate. Orwell was such a genius. In 1984, they knew the the dictator had to have someone for people to hate. So there would be various enemies who would rotate, who would always be the ones to hate.
And Linda, to answer your question, it's not all about land.
It's not. It's not. It's hardly about land at all. As I said before, Linda, God bless your soul. That it's now been thoroughly documented. It could hardly be more thoroughly documented that the land that is being talked about and fought about has always been in Jewish hands. It's always legally been owned by Jews. This is a new development that the Palestinians are claiming that because they have squatters' rights, that they have something called squatters' rights, which is not a legally recognizable concept, that it's their land. But it isn't. It never has. It hasn't been since 1875.
And on that note, if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein, where we discuss everything from COVID to Israel to Chicago to everything in between. There's nothing that doesn't get discussed on this show. I love it. We could disagree to disagree. We could agree to agree. We could all that jazz. And I love the questions that are coming in the chat. I love the comments. Remember, we're on Rumble now, rumble.com. We will probably be streaming from there very soon. That's we will be shifting from YouTube to Rumble, so we don't have fear of God in us that we will be banned every episode. And welcome back, of course, to The World According to Ben Stein. We're with Gary Collins tonight from thesimplelifenow.com, who will be interviewing Ben. And somebody, by the way, Gary, said the podcast we did about dating was great. I would love to say we would do a part 2, but I haven't had a date since the podcast.
Imagine that.
So I'm not exactly sure what we would discuss on it. Not getting dates, part 2 with Judah Friedman. And of course, we're joined tonight by America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. I want to take this last segment to have a little fun, a little just a little non-political stuff. We need a little light nature, a little lightness in our lives. And because it's really hard to find. You can't turn on the TV, you can't go to movies. Even going to Amazon Prime or Netflix is so frustrating. Now it's like they're celebrating Pacific Islander month.
Don't sneer at that. We have very, very many Filipinos working at our house.
Yes, I do. I know, and I would imagine the Filipinos who are amazing people, absolutely amazing, are offended by Pacific Islander month. I in my humble opinion. But I want to get to a theme we've discussed in the past of places you've been, of events in history you've witnessed, and what are some of the more, amazing things you've witnessed? You've flown on Air Force 2,
Air Force One also.
You've flown on Air Force One. You've met Elvis.
Yes, that was great.
You've written for 2 presidents.
Yes.
What are some of your fondest memories?
Well, they have very little to do with politics, except for the fact that Mr. Nixon used to greet me as I was walking down the hall of the Executive Office Building and say a few very cheery and encouraging words. And after he left office, when he was down at San Clemente, I used to go down and visit him, and he would be kind enough to grant me quite lengthy interviews where I could ask him anything. And some of the things he said were astonishingly candid. And at the time, I wrote something about them, but some of them were just too hot to handle. And I am writing a book about my adventures with Nixon and why I feel as strongly pro Nixon as I do. And I'll have some more in that. But some of them were just so hot, I can't mention them even now. But my happiest moments, of course, are, of course, getting married to my incredibly beautiful wife, the world's most wonderful human being. And also the incredible pleasure it gave me to see how happy my mother and father were to be included in the inner circle of the White House with Mr. Nixon. It changed their lives and made them much happier people.
Ben, I want to get to something, but you need to turn over your air conditioner because it's muffling the sound.
Very hot in here, but just
well, I didn't ask you to wear 42 layers. But I think a really cool story is, a lot of people don't know this, Gary, is Ben's father was just one of the most was a world famous economist and actually helped save Israel's economy too. But I love, one of my favorite stories is when he got Win Ben Stein's money. and he didn't have. He was so proud of you that he got cable, right?
Yes, he did. No, he didn't get cable. He got a satellite dish. He was at the Watergate, and they didn't have cable, but he got a satellite dish so that he could watch me and invite his neighbors in to watch me on Win Ben Stein's Money. And then CBS on 60 Minutes, they had a segment about my life, and he had a little party of people to come over and watch that. He was very proud of me, and I was extremely proud of him, to put it mildly.
And I know Gary has a few questions, so go for it, Gary Collins.
Well, I'm just wondering, would CBS do anything expose on you today?
I don't think.
Are you getting these calls?
My life is so boring now. I don't think there's anything much they could do about me. So I don't think that's going to happen. I live a very quiet life.
You've kind of had many split careers. Of all the careers you've had, all the things you've done in life, which one did you like the most?
Teaching at American University in Washington, D.C. in 1971 to 72. I taught 3 semesters of a class on the political content of feature films. And at that time, there were no VHS, there were no DVDs. If I wanted to show a movie, I had to rent the movie and get a projector and a screen, and then we would show it in the classroom, and the kids would watch it, and then we would talk about it. And wow, we had an awfully good time.
So we have a question here. We have a few questions. Is there a major network, Ben, you haven't appeared on?
I'm sorry. You made me turn off the air conditioner. I'm trying to get some ventilation.
Is there a network you haven't appeared on?
No.
What is it like? What was a young Sean Penn like?
Oh, Sean Penn was fine. He was wait, back up. I don't think I worked with Sean Penn. I worked with Chris Penn in a thing called I forget what it was called, but it was a movie. It was a sequel, The Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I think it was called The Wildlife or something like that. But I never worked with him. But I worked with.
Forgot about that one.
Yeah, that was a very little known movie. But I worked with lots of other people. And I will say that on one episode, I was a recurring on the Wonder Years. I appeared on maybe 10 or 12 episodes. And on one episode, there was a young woman who played a high school girl who had just moved into the neighborhood. And she was flirting with Fred Savage, who was a star of the show. And she was, except for my wife, the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life. And the absolute number one most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life. And I looked her up recently online, and she's married to the world's mixed martial arts champion.
Okay, one of my favorite, I got to tell you a story. Okay, first of all, the WD-40, the charm of Ben's door is that it creaks. And yes, Ben and Jimmy are still very close. They are good friends. They could disagree with each other, but
Carl
Jimmy
Bernstein and I are so close
and
friends.
Carl Bernstein, who took down Ben's, who supposedly. And I lost my what I was going to. Really funny story was when Ben was watching a movie. What was it, from the 50s, where you just thought the actress was beautiful, and you looked her up, and her husband owns the that kooky bookstore.
Oh yeah. That's right. No, it was a movie from the 60s, I think, called The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. And there was an incredibly beautiful girl who was one of the stars. And I looked her up, and turned out she's married to a bookseller in West Hollywood. And I went over to meet him and see if she was around. And I met him, and I don't know. I mean, at this point, when she made the movie, she was a teenager. Now she's in her 70s. My wife's in her 70s. She's the most beautiful woman in the world, but it's a whole different thing.
And it was like this bookshop, Gary, where I kid you not, books were what, $10,000 there?
Yeah, they're incredibly
expensive. Just like this, like you walk in, it's like you can't even go in there and go, can I, everything is at least $1,000 or $2,000.
It's insane. It was insane.
And I also find it ironic that that you did that movie, the sequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High,
called The Wildlife.
And the guy that wrote a scathing review, or not a nice review of one of your books.
It wasn't a scathing review, Judah. It was my book called Ludes, which is
the best book.
Really, if I may say so, a really good book about drug and money addiction in Los Angeles. And this fellow, whose name I have
Cameron Crowe.
Cameron Crowe, whose name I have mercifully until now blocked out. He wrote a review of it for the LA Times, which he said he was very disappointed that this was a story about adults being addicted to drugs because he thought it was going to be about teenagers addicted to drugs. I thought that's the most ridiculous reason for liking or not liking a book I ever heard of.
And no, the bookstore is not Taschen, which Ben and I have been to many times.
It's called Book Soup, isn't it? It's called Book Soup. I think it is.
It could be, but getting back to it, if you could, you like Gary asked you a question, which I think is really cool. You've crossed all these different lines. You've crossed movies, you've crossed the writing, but what was your favorite? Well, other than teaching at American
University, it was incredible. I loved it so much. I was young, I was thin, I was hip. I had an incredibly great car. I had a 62 red Corvette. I was so cool. It was amazing. The co-eds were throwing themselves at me. It was just wonderful. It was just absolutely wonderful. When I walked in the first day of the last semester I taught, I walked in and the whole class stood and cheered and clapped and stamped their feet. It was wonderful. It was heaven. It was heaven. The only other time that's happened recently was when I gave a speech in Sandpoint, Idaho, and at the Panda Theater, and the whole town turned out for it and was doing the same thing. And that's Sandpoint, which is my favorite town in the world.
So why'd you stop?
I wanted to move out to California. I was sick of the horrible, horrible heat and humidity in Washington, D.C. And so I moved. I got a job teaching at UC Santa Cruz, and I moved out there. It is the most beautiful campus you've ever seen. But I shouldn't have moved. I should have just prolonged that stay at American U as long as I could have. But it's lucky I did, because I went out to UC Santa Cruz. I had a good time, but then a faculty member made a very anti-Semitic gesture to me. It caused me to resign. I came back to Washington and got the job at the Nixon White House. And that moved my life up many, many levels.
And it's also, Gary noted that Ben was at UC Santa Cruz, and we brought this up on the show before, when the big Ed Kemper was the serial killer, was killing the co-eds.
Edmund Emil Kemper, yes.
Yeah.
He also cut off the head of Clarnell Svanberg, the secretary to the faculty member who was so mean to me, and he put her headless body in a closet. And then he called the police and said, "Come over here, boys. I've got something to show you."
And that was his mother. And Gary, did you learn anything tonight?
Many things, as always.
What a way to end the show. The headless corpse of Edward
Clarnell Strandberg. And Mr. Kemper is still alive and well.
Big Ed Kemper, yeah. I got to tell you, if you're looking for something to stream and you haven't streamed it, watch Mindhunters. It was one of the few shows on Netflix that I was really upset that they stopped. It was a great 2 seasons. It's nothing political. It's about the origins of forensics in the FBI. It is worth the watch. I wanted to tell people another thing to watch. To the people, I know a lot of people aren't knowledgeable or don't know so much about Israel, and we're talking about it a lot. There's an amazing show on Netflix called Fauda, Fauda, and it simply means chaos in Arabic. I promise you, it's you can watch it closed captioning, and please, guys. What?
You'll learn a lot.
You'll learn a lot, but I'm trying to think. It's a foreign film, and you have to read. I can't. It's subtitles, and it's amazing. I highly recommend it. I highly suggest it. And on that note, I want to thank everybody. It's been a wonderful Saturday night. We went in a million different directions, but that's what we do here sometimes. We go in many directions. Gary will be interviewing Ben Stein tomorrow for his podcast, which I don't know when it'll be up, but you can find Gary at thesimplelifenow.com. Sorry?
Interviewing me at noon.
He's interviewing Gary at noon. Gary's interviewing Ben at noon, and which should be fun. It'll be a great podcast. It won't be about dating, but like with me, but no, never mind. And of course, you could find Ben Stein at spectator.org, or when we're up on Parler at Ben Stein. And of course, the podcasts on Apple, The World According to Ben Stein, are everywhere downloadable. And of course, on rumble.com. Ben Stein, would you like to take us out on this fine Saturday night? And thank you, everybody. We'll see you Tuesday
I've done
night.
this before, but I have to do it again. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above, from the ocean, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet